Episode of another episode of Clearly Crucial podcast, all about gaining clarity in life and business and how that impacts our success. Today, I have my very special guest, Merri-jo Hillaker. Welcome to the show, Merri-jo.
Thanks. So happy to be here with you, Jesse.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you and I have gone back quite a ways. We've worked on a number of different projects and courses and initiatives. And one reason I really wanted to have you on is because you have a particular specialty in helping people understand clarity, not just about what they do, but about themselves as well. So I would love to hear more about that. But first, just tell us a little bit about your background for those of you who aren't familiar. Like, who is Merri-jo? What do you do? And what are you really all about in this space?
And, it's a perfect topic to talk about who I am and what I've done in my history, because I didn't have clarity when I started off, right? I grew up in a family of four, relatively poor. I was we were all 1 year apart. I was very driven. I ended up, doing very well in school, undergraduate, law school. Then I wasn't sure what I wanted in my life. So I said, I'm going to go out to NYU to just see New York City, because I was raised in Wisconsin. And I went to NYU to get a master's in tax just to see maybe I want to live in New York the rest of my life. And that sent me on a trip to say, no, I don't want to live in New York the rest of my life, because no one would ever make eye contact with me. So I came back to Wisconsin and took jobs in big law firms. I jumped away from that after a couple of years and became vice president general counsel of a publicly traded company at 28 years old. A lot of people would say, well, success was yours. Well, success wasn't mine, because if you're not happy with what you're doing, then you have no success. A lot of people say it's the money. And I said, no, the money doesn't matter. What matters is, are you filling your soul? And I went through a lot of trouble. I started a company, I sold another one, I shut down one. And finally, I went and did some core value analysis. I did some self-development work. And that's where I discovered my top core values.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because it sounds like from what you're describing, those were some of the moments where you really gained a lot of clarity that made an impact going forward. What was that like?
Absolutely. Well, it was eye-opening, because it's funny that you can have so much success in your life and still not know who you are. You're finding what really makes you feel complete. And that's what you want to, that's success in life. Success isn't how much money in the bank, how many companies you have, how many houses you have, your material assets, or a successful marriage that's successful marriage. But what about you? Are you really serving your life purpose? And each of us is guided by different principles that become so core to us. And discovering that, so that when you start fulfilling those core values and you live them every day of your life, that's where you can live every day with a smile on your face. Instead of every time something happens outside, it impacts you and drives you down a different path. You are on the path where you're going to be creating the greatest joy in your life, notwithstanding what happens all around you. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, it does. And obviously that path that you're talking about can change at times too. It's not always just perfectly straight and narrow. What are some of the ways that people who, have experienced both sides of the spectrum, like knowing with certainty that they're loving what they're doing right now, but also at times questioning that, like, what are some ways that we can really gain that clarity in and around core values and the path we're going? So it's fulfillment, not just success, quote unquote.
Right. Well, then I usually talk to people from a perspective of really understanding, do you really understand yourself? Because most people don't have that depth of understanding. They just were driven by different things in their life. Somebody told them, hey, you're really good at this. You could be very talented in some area. Like I was very talented in math and legal, but all I do is pro bono work now, which is in alignment with my number one core value. So I still go back to, dude, if you're not digging deep enough inside of you to know what really brings you the greatest joy in life, then you're always going to be trying something new. Whether it's every other week or every other month or every other year, who are you and what truly will fill your soul? And now you'll go and pursue the things that are going to fill that for you. And it could be, for some of you, you might be looking at your life going, well, but I have to make so much money. I have to take care of family. So there's certain things. Well, you might be in a job environment or something that really doesn't fill your soul. So you're not looking for that. But what are you doing on the outside of the job? How are you fulfilling your passion outside of the job if you're not passionate at your job? And although I tend to tell people there are plenty of jobs out there, why don't you find one that really fills your soul?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it
For
may
sure.
take you time. So it's like, don't, they go, well, but how do I pay the bills this week? And I said, stay in the job you're in, but be in pursuit. Because
Mm.
the first discovery is, what are my core values? Who am I as a person down deep, that I can feel this will bless me every moment of my day?
Right, that's true. And you can't even begin that pursuit unless you know where you're going, right? You have the clarity of what that even looks like, or the direction at the very least. Because otherwise, I think what a lot of people do is they start chasing like the shiny object, where they say, "Oh, that's something other people like. Maybe I should go chase that as well." And then it's just the hamster wheel of success, and then realizing you're not fulfilled, and so on and so forth. And so I was going to ask you, like, because I know you do a lot of mindset coaching and, like you said, pro bono work in a lot of different areas. And so, can you speak to a little bit about the role that clarity plays in helping everyone that you work with really move to that next level?
Absolutely, because you find so many people I work with, whether it's in relationships or business, whatever it is, any category of your life, faith walk, all of that, coming back to creating clarity by viewing yourself first. We can be clear on what's happening around us in the world. We can have clarity about this and clarity about it, but clarity about self always comes first. So people can look at something and go, wow, I'm really clear this job. Look at what it is. Da, 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 da. I can't wait to jump in it. But my question then is that what's going to fill your soul? Because if you're missing that first step. So I usually dig back into, helping them establish who they are. Because if you're not filling that every day, you could be making all the money in the world. You could be finding your perfect job as you perceive it. But at the end of the day, at the end of the year, 10 years down the road, you still feel a hole inside of yourself, that there's something missing. And how could I have something missing? And a lot of these people are extremely wealthy. See, a lot of people, they say, well, they have so much money, obviously they're happy. And I go, obviously they're not.
Right.
Some of my biggest clients are very wealthy people that feel totally empty in their life because they never dug deep to find out what really is their purpose, what really would fill their soul, because we're all uniquely made.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't judge ourselves based on what's going on around us. And we have a tendency to compare, don't we? Isn't that a
We
big?
do.
Yeah.
Indeed. And yeah, and even that, what you just mentioned before, when you talk about comparison, like, what is comparison but just looking at somebody for your own level of assurance of what you should be doing, right?
You're right.
Rather than getting the clarity internally.
Internal.
Or yeah, right. And so it's no wonder that we get stuck in this trap of comparison, because it's a level of clarity from a different perspective that isn't even our own. And so
Right.
yeah, no,
And
it totally makes sense.
we're very much raised that way, Jesse. I mean, we look at our parents when we're growing up and our brothers and sisters, and we go to school, and what do? As a little kid, you go, oh, look at Tommy. He's getting straight A's. I better work harder. Or look at, my buddy Sarah, and she's running track and I'm not doing it. And so we want to jump. We're driven that way. Our family a lot of times puts pressure on us to be the best in something. So, but it's
Whether
all
we
about,
like it or not.
right. Maybe I am being my best, but I'm not going to beat Tommy.
Mm.
But yet our parents push us, and so we get this wrong sense of direction in our life. And then we are on that path and we don't know how to get rid of it out of our mindset, right? It
Right.
lingers in there. And some people have this confusion their whole life. My goal is to try to get to people as soon as possible to
Right.
help them say, who are you? What floats your boat? What are your, right? And that's what I like to do.
Right. Yeah, because I think you mentioned even in your own journey, it took a long time to achieve some of those levels of clarity. And I was hoping you could talk about some of those key moments where things shifted. And like, what was it really like going through those moments of gaining clarity? Like, what did you do? Was it just a stressful circumstance, or like, how did that all really come about?
Well, if I look back at each of the different events, I wasn't really at my core happy. I mean, you might be making a lot of money, but I realized that didn't bring me internal joy. I was frustrated. I, got into some bad habits. I started, alcohol was not issue that I was an alcoholic, but I started, and I never was a drinker. And so I could see I was developing escape patterns in my life that I was kind of trying, and yet I was highly successful. But success on the wrong path will most likely never fulfill your life. And I know chasing money never will either. You can chase money all your life, and you know what the problem there is, you're never going to have enough. I work with multi-millionaires, billionaires, and they're still chasing money because it's all about keeping up with the next guy ahead of them. And what a horrific path that is for life, to think that you can live your life frustrated at. So it's looking at that, you know, and for me, it was just the discomfort I had thinking, is this all there is? I'm not feeling that I'm living my purpose. I'm not feeling like, it just felt like a job. It just felt like, you know, and trust me, money was all over the place for me. And that was never going to be an answer.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who's kind of in one of those moments potentially right now where they're asking themselves that question, like in a way that you took that situation, made it productive, and you changed some things and gave more clarity about yourself? What would you recommend for somebody who may find themselves in that position?
That's where I love to step in and say, let's do some coaching and just discover you. Because really, when you're lost and confused like that, it's not because of the environment around you, it's because you don't have clarity about what really your purpose is, what really would really give you the greatest joy in life. And, you know, if you're not there, it's hard to think that you're going to be capable of finding it, because if you were, why haven't you already done it? Does this make sense? So that's where intervention, and it doesn't have to be Merri-jo Hillaker, it can be other people in your life, that talented people who understand how to discover people's core, help people discover their core values. And then how do I match my core values every day of my life? And then all of a sudden,
through.
Absolutely. Now you can live your whole life coming from joy, no matter what happens in your environment. The environment doesn't change your outlook, because you truly are experiencing joy in everything you do, because you're living those core values.
Yeah. It's amazing, whether it's, you know, senses of fulfillment or even just a logistical problem in a business. It's funny how long people will stay stuck in the same place, wondering, like, with the thought process that goes something along the lines of, oh well, next month it'll be better. Oh well, once this happens, then we'll be fine. Oh well, once this works, it never does. Like, and I think what you mentioned before is so key, is if it hasn't solved itself already, what makes you think it's going to come
solve itself next month,
next year, next month, next quarter?
Wait, but next month is June. Oh, that's, I mean, they just use, it's totally illogical rationalizations to conclude that, but they fail to look at how am I rationalizing it to acknowledge how ridiculous the rationalizations are, right? I mean, but we have one because we have to justify our conclusion. So we rationalize, no matter what premise it's on, we rationalize why that's going to be true. I say, you know, if you don't change, nothing's going to change. So it's like pointing the finger out at everything else around us and going, wait a minute, let's go back here. Let's start.
Well,
here.
I guess that's what it is, right? If we start making these illogical statements, then really what it is it's just a defense mechanism,
Correct.
Right? Because if we were completely unattached, we'd be like, oh, maybe it's me. But that seems to be like the first hurdle, so to speak, to really overcome that. Would you say that that's really like the first hurdle to getting clarity in this kind of areas, getting for ourselves, maybe?
I think it's not just about clarity. I think it's about everything in life. Okay. It's about, how do I look at myself? Because one of the major programs that runs people's psyche, and you keep going, is called the need to be right.
Yes.
So we fight for something and we pursue it because of that need to be right. And so if you look at yourself and say, look at how many paths I've gone down, and because of my need to be right, I just chased rabbits way past the woods, into the forest, into the trees, and because I needed to be right about the position I was taking. So I love the perspective. For me, I love to be wrong, not because we want to be wrong, because it allows me to grow. You follow? So look at the beauty of being wrong about something, instead of beating up on yourself and calling yourself stupid and all the self-denigration we do when we find ourselves in that situation. Rejoice when something doesn't work out, because you learned something.
Yeah.
What works? This is what I tell people. I say failure is another concept with people. When they fail at something, what happens to the normal person? They go in depression, they get out the club, they beat themselves over the head, they go pity parties, they go wah, wah, wah. And one big lesson for all of you is this. Every time something doesn't work, I want you to say this: what worked? What didn't work? What's next?
Mm.
So you go through the educational process, and now you can be exuberant about what's next. Because in everything that doesn't work, there's always a lesson. But most of us don't want to find it. We just want to point the finger, right?
Well, that's it. To find the truth would be to admit the wrong in that way,
Oh,
that's probably, and that's what's coming to my mind as you're talking about this, because that's where it makes sense, right? If I am protecting my need to be right, then it must be all these other things that could possibly be wrong with my results or my satisfaction or whatsoever. Let me investigate every single one of the possibilities, which of course are endless. Like it's
absolutely.
endless directions until you turn it around. So
And
that's
what's causing that? It's a
this
three-letter word.
ego, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
It's all about our ego. You're so worried about being wrong. I want you to say this: I love being wrong because it's teaching me a lesson of how I can find what's right. So, you can't always find what's right and what will work until you go through some of the things that won't work. I
Right.
mean, you look at, all these discoveries that were made. I don't know how many times, coming up with a light bulb. You look at all these discoveries you hear, they only had to do it 100, 800 times wrong before they find. And thank goodness some of these inventors had that determination. What's wrong with us today? We want it to happen like yesterday, right?
Hmm.
We're so impatient in
Yeah.
process. And I look back and I go, wow, sometimes we don't learn much from the past, do we?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's interesting that the past can serve to teach, but only if we're ready to listen and ready to learn and apply. Because, I've known and seen people like all day long who know all of the answers to the questions or to the problems they find themselves in, and yet they're still there, right? The knowing is not enough, right? It's as important and foundational as clarity is. I've found it's I think that's why we always come back to identity and core values and stuff like that, because you have to have the clarity and which creates the drive in yourself to pursue those ends, to
Mhm.
then go through on the actionable step. Because otherwise, I think there's a conflict there. Like there's the conflict between, if I'm not clear on who I am, then why in the world would I do this crazy,
Right.
difficult thing to achieve the success? Maybe I want it, but do I want it that bad? It's not until we clear up the first part that the second part becomes inevitable, really.
Right. Yeah. Clarity's crucial.
Yeah.
That's why I always approach people all the time and say, and the clarity for me always starts with core values.
Hmm.
If you don't, you want, before you have clarity about where you're going and what your project is and who you're marrying or how you're going to raise your kids, first be really clear. Who are you? What are my core values? What's most important in my life? And really spend time digging in that, because that will set you free from the confusion that you will automatically create in your life, every single one of those relationships, your judgment, your work environment, because you don't recognize what's most important to you.
Hmm.
And that's where I came from. At 35 years old, my life totally shifted. I understand my top three core values, my top one most important, and I pursue that. And now I'm turning 69 this year. And guess what? I'm living the life of my dreams for the last 35 years.
That's amazing. Would you say it's a lot easier to go through life sticking to a set of core values than trying to follow through on some specific plans that you made up 10 years ago?
Totally. Totally. Because, and here's the most important thing to acknowledge about that. Hello, does life change?
Oh
All you have to
no,
do is
I've
look at
never seen that
technology.
before.
You look at technology and it's exploding every 5 seconds, all the mechanisms we have. I mean, when I look at what I do today, even doing this Zoom present, right? I mean, it's just these things, this technology didn't even exist. Some of the stuff we're using is started yesterday or a week ago, and we know it's so rapidly changing. So the ability, that's another issue a lot of people have. Adaptive. How adaptive are you to
Yeah,
change? And if you're not adaptive to change today, you'll never survive.
that's a great point. And that reminds me of something I saw the other day where someone was giving an example of um, if you had like, let's say you were in the desert and you had a little robot that was going to call for help and it needed to get to a specific point. Would you rather have a very detailed map of the sand dunes to help the robot get there, or would you rather have the robot have the just the point where I need to get to, and the ability to navigate when the sand shifts? You'd
No.
much rather have the robot be able
Ability to
to adapt,
navigate.
because you could have a perfect map, but the moment it starts, the plans start to shift. In our own world, it's either AI or the economy or whatever, but
Yeah,
stuff changes. And so I think having the skill sets, the tools to adapt is way better than even having just a clarity of vision of how you want to get somewhere, because it's gonna change.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
not even counting when you change too.
Well, that's
Sometimes
what I'm
because
saying. Internally, you could be changing. I think people are changing a lot all the time. We all go through growth, ideas and concepts, and so if you don't have adaptability, you're in trouble.
Mhm.
You're in trouble.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
So really just to kind of cap it all off then, Merri-jo, when it comes to the impact that clarity has had on your life and the people that you've worked with, what would
Uh-huh.
you say is your biggest takeaway from going from, before just chasing after every different thing to feel that success to, after 35, really having that perspective shift? What would you say is the one most important thing that you would want people to take away when it comes to really taking it seriously and not just thinking of it as another shiny object? Oh, maybe I'll do that, maybe I won't. Like, what would you say to
I
that?
mean, shiny object and making that kind of investment in themselves to move forward and
Not even necessarily making an investment sales, but really just like taking the time. Because I think that that's really what it is the intention, whether it's with some exercise online or just some quiet space in a dark room somewhere away from
yeah,
all the noise. Like, what would you say to encourage someone to pursue the clarity of themselves versus just continue to go the way they are right now?
I'll just say this. Why do you want to keep hitting your head against the wall? Really, you're just really, if joy and internal happiness is critical for your life, which I believe it should be for everybody, then find out who you are. What are those core values? So that, you're not keep banging against the wall every time you go a different direction. You feel lost again. Okay, it must be this way. Well, it must be this way. I mean, you can put me anywhere on the planet and I will come from joy. Anyway, put me on the sand dunes in the Sahara Desert, and you know what? I'll go, okay, another challenge, right? You get, and it just is because you get to come from the core of who you are. What's most important to you in your life, your values, and it's understanding that there is nothing. For me, I think it's the number one principle. I love to teach kids today. I teach adults. I teach every age group because most people, I think it should be taught in schools.
Yeah, 100%. And
100.
that's one of the things I love about being a parent in this day and age, having a little 2-year-old of my own too, is I know that regardless of what school he goes through, we now as parents have the skill sets, because we've both learned from you, to instill into him as well, which I know
Right.
he'll have all his own stuff to work through, but at least it puts him one more step ahead, which I think is the goal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Being at choice, teaching children choice. I think it's really powerful. And parents go, oh, no, 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 I can't give my child choice. He doesn't know what he's doing. I go, well, then he'll never know what he's doing. I mean, right. You want the child to fall. You want the child to have some experiences because through the experiences are all the learning and the lessons that go with it. And so it's like, and then, but not just pick him up, and nurture him and
Hmm.
take care of it. You go, wow, you can nurture, but you go, what did you learn? Did you learn something from what just happened? We as parents go like, oh, come on, Merri-jo, just comfort him. And I go, good. He's going to need to be pampered the rest of his life, right?
Hmm.
You don't understand how you're programming your child in those first 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah,
And as you raise them, so they will be. And then you get
correct.
angry with them at 25 when they're still coming home because they still need to be nurtured.
Right. Well, that's
Right.
funny you mentioned that. One of the best pieces of advice we've learned and gotten is you're raising adults, not raising children. And so if you raise a child to be a child, they will be a child even as they grow. But if you raise them to be an adult, then they will become an adult. And
Yeah.
really, where that all starts is the clarity behind what you're doing. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
that's
Great.
that's really good. Well, I appreciate you coming out, Merri-jo. I think this was really, really fun, really valuable. I wanted to give you a moment as well. I know that you're doing a couple of different things right now, as always. But why don't you go ahead and tell anybody who's watching, if they really loved this, if they really loved you, how can they get in touch with you, and what kind of stuff do you got going on in your world right now?
A lot of things. I do have a Merri-jo Hillaker website that you can go look at. I have a lot of programs, mindset programs that I do for people. So you can catch up with Merri-jo on that. I'm also starting a brand new company that's E-Success Network, and it's all aimed at how do we get together as women and decide maybe entrepreneurship is exactly what I want, and let me figure out what that's going to look like for me. So it's a community. We'll probably have like 50 coaches involved in it, and just helping. And because I really love the age 20s and 30s, and I know there are a lot of people, and it's like, how do I help support you with all the experiences we have as coaches? How do I help you achieve your greatest success? And that's my new project I'm working on right now. So yeah, so can you see what my number one core value is here?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Contribution. How do I help change people's lives and give them this blessing that I feel I've been blessed with for the last 35 years of my life?
That's fantastic, for sure. And so we will have to do this again when you actually launch as well, so people can have somewhere to go, for sure. But in the meantime, what kind of social media platforms do you prefer that they follow you on or connect with you on your website, or what do you prefer?
Yeah, a lot. We have a big I have my assistant that puts me on Instagram all the time. I do reels there all the time, so that probably is the number one place they can interact as well. And so yeah,
perfect. Okay, so Merri-jo Hillaker, Instagram, website, here on LinkedIn as well. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again, Merri-jo. This is really, really wonderful to have you on. We will see you guys again next time. And until then, take care. And